And today we are putting out our brand new poll here in Texas, our KTVT CBS 11 Dixie Strategies poll, and Brian Graham from Dixie Strategies is joining us. Brian, first tell us about how many people surveyed, how many people answered the poll, how many Republicans, Democrats, and the margin of error.
Well, we have, in the responses, we have 780 likely voters. Of those, 321 were Republicans, 254 were Democrats, 205 were other.
And those are people who are independents, right?
Correct. Self-identified. You know, in Texas, you don't register by party.
Right.
It is, you actually self-identify in the state of Texas, and they base a lot of it based upon, you know, which primary you choose to vote in.
Is that number surprising as far as having almost as many independents as Democrats in Texas?
Not necessarily. There's a trend nationwide of people shifting, especially younger voters, shifting to be no party affiliation, meaning they're disenfranchised with both parties.
Interesting. And then the margin of error is 3.5%, which is a good number.
Correct.
The lower the number, the better.
Absolutely.
So let's get started. Donald Trump, 45%. Hillary Clinton, 38%. What's the headline there?
Well, I think the headline here is that Donald Trump is underperforming in the state of Texas. He really should be doing a lot better. There's no reason why, at this late stage in the game, that he should be under 50% in the state of Texas. And I think that goes to show you the struggles that Donald Trump has had and continues to have throughout this campaign.
So is this a result of the first debate? Because the last time around we did this back in August, this was after the conventions, he was actually a little bit ahead. He had 46% and Hillary Clinton had 35%. So it's kind of flat, I guess, for both of them. She's done a little better this time around. But is this a result of the first debate where he did not do so well?
Well, it's difficult to tell. When you include the margin of error, you're within the margin of error, you know, within this poll and the last one, so they're relatively close. However, I will say that Donald Trump probably did not help himself at the last debate. The headlines are oftentimes worse than actually what happens at the debate. It was a very highly watched debate, as you know. But the headlines afterwards really do hurt a candidate. And I think you saw that with Donald Trump.
Well, he had a week last week of...
And a bad week.
He had a bad week. I mean, it was damaging to himself, reacting to the news about the former Miss Universe, as opposed to talking about the issues.
Correct. The more time that Donald Trump spends defending himself and what he says and his actions and not attacking Hillary Clinton, who is also a weak candidate. She has many problems, many issues that can be exposed. He is really distracting himself from the issues. So he's been a distraction himself.
And I should mention, we are on Facebook Live, as I said before, so if you have comments or questions, please let us know. Our producer, our partner, Zalani, is here helping me out with that, so if we have any comments yet, what do we have?
We have one from Jack Cohen. He says, if Trump hasn't learned anything from Pence, it's a good night, Irene. I think the town hall format would be an advantage to Trump if he takes some pointers from Pence. Thoughts?
Okay, well, making sure everybody heard the question he was talking about, and I think I met Jack at the convention, at the Democratic convention. He's from our area, if I remember correctly, so the name sounds familiar. But it's a fair question as far as debate performance. Last night, Mike Pence being credited with winning the debate, having a very good debate, mentioning a lot of things that Donald Trump did not mention. So are there things that Donald Trump can learn from his running mate?
If you watch the debate performance that Donald Trump had versus the debate performance that Mike Pence had, there is a very different style that these two men have. Donald Trump is not nearly as likable as Mike Pence. Mike Pence comes across very likable. He does very well on camera. He did a very good job. And a lot of times it's not necessarily what you say, but how you say it. And Mike Pence was involved in telling stories. And I think that is what makes him successful. Would a town hall format be more advantageous for Donald Trump? It very well may. I think that the format of a split screen like they had in the last presidential debate for Donald Trump was not advantageous for him at all.
Well, we talk about this town hall format. really brings a whole set of different challenges because the real voters are going to be asking questions. So if you want to make a point about your opponent, you first have to answer their question directly with making eye contact, right? And then you have to pivot, right? So you have a lot to do.
Correct. And Hillary she does prepare for those debates. You know, it was obvious that she did a lot of preparation. She had all the facts and the figures and the numbers. She did a decent job at the debate. It is yet to be determined whether she would do better in that format or he would do better. But it's something that I'm sure we would all like to see. Isn't
her challenge, though, she has to appear as approachable?
Likable. Absolutely.
Likable.
She has to be approachable, likable. Absolutely. And that is a tremendous challenge for Hillary Clinton. Whereas I don't think anyone doubts that she's intelligent. I don't think anyone doubts that she knows what she's talking about. However, Hillary has an issue where do people trust her? Do they like her? Do they believe what she says? Or does she even mean what she says? Donald Trump, despite all of his flaws, people do think that he kind of says what he means. He's not a politician. I think that's very obvious. And people seem to be very hungry for someone now in this election cycle that is not a politician. I mean, we saw that in the primaries, and we're seeing that now in the general election, with Trump doing relatively well despite all of the bad news that he has received. Now, part of that is because Hillary Clinton has not been the best candidate herself.
All right. Well, do we have any other comments?
We have one more from Joe Flores. He believes that the race is a tie, and it'll be up to the independent voters. I mean, do we want to talk about independent voters and how important they are for this election?
Joe, thank you so much. And that's interesting because, and we'll get to the national numbers and the key battleground states. Texas is not considered a key battleground state, but when we talk about the independents here in Texas, Donald Trump does far better than Hillary Clinton.
Correct. Donald Trump is doing better in the state of Texas with independent voters. If you look at other states, he might not be doing so well with independent voters. Independent voters tend to side with the atmosphere in their state in general. So voters in Texas tend to be more conservative in general anyways.
Okay.
So independent voters would be more conservative as a whole than would independent voters nationwide.
So, Joe, and for everybody listening out there, it's 46% of the independents, the other voters for Donald Trump, 30% for Hillary Clinton. That's a pretty sizable difference.
It is, but still note none of them are, neither candidate is over 50%. Still.
Now, do you think come Election Day, and of course we have 2 more debates to go through, that Donald Trump will be above 50% here in Texas?
I think he will. I think at the end of the day he will, reach above 50% here in the state of Texas. Because I think at the end of the day people are going to have to go into the voting booth and they're going to have to make the decision. You can't be undecided in the voting booth. I mean, I guess you could skip it, but still most people are going to make a decision and they're going to vote for either Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump. And if you look at the past performance of the state of Texas, all indicators will show you or tell you that Donald Trump most likely is going to be the victor in the state of Texas, and he should get over 50%. Now, he may not get as high as John McCain. He may not get as high as Mitt Romney.
I was going to ask you about that. Right, because Mitt Romney in 2012 had 57%, and John McCain in 2008 had 55%.
Correct.
So whether Donald Trump gets up to that, I mean, it may not matter anyway, right? Because if he wins, he wins.
Correct. It's an electoral college system. It's a state-by-state battle. And if you win Texas, you win Texas. And in the Electoral College, Democrats actually tend to have an advantage right now in the Electoral College. And so how much you win a state doesn't necessarily matter.
Well, when we talk about the Electoral College and you talk about the key battleground states, that's really where the election is won, right?
Correct.
So if you look at Florida, where you're from, that's a tight race. Last week, Trump still had a small edge. Now it's shifted back to Clinton if you look at the average of Real Clear Politics polls. But he was ahead in Colorado and Nevada. And now that's shifted back a little bit in Hillary Clinton's favor.
I think some of that has to do with the debate performance and the headlines. It was a bad week of headlines for Donald Trump. if he could get out of his own way, he would do himself a lot of good.
When he focuses on the issues, his message resonates, seemingly, on the economy, trade. That part of his message is resonating with people. Even, I would say, what, immigration, depending on the state?
Depending on the state. His message is not necessarily a bad message. He's a populist, meaning he appeals to a wide swath of Americans out there, and it kind of cuts across party lines. His appeal, you know, he's anti-trade. If you look at his numbers,
anti-free trade. He's more fair trade.
Anti-free trade,
yeah.
Correct, and anti these trade deals, I should say, such as NAFTA and others.
Right.
Wants to redo them and thinks that he could do a better job. So you can see him doing better in states that have large working class, blue collar, white populations, such as the state of Ohio, where he is still holds a lead, and that
a sizable lead,
a sizable
5
lead.
points.
And Hillary Clinton actually, you know, there was an article recently where she really has not been in Ohio in some time because she doesn't think she can win Ohio.
But if Trump were to win, he has got to win Ohio, but he's also got to win Florida.
Absolutely.
And that's on top of all of the Romney 2012 states. And then he also needs some kind of combination between either Pennsylvania and Michigan or both Nevada and Colorado in order to win this.
Right, and he can't just have white voters. He's got to reach out. So when you start looking at states like Florida, he's losing ground in a state like Florida, which has a large Hispanic population and is not as white as a state like Ohio.
Right, but there you have a very interesting dynamic among Hispanic voters because
Correct.
You have Cubans who have typically and historically voted Republican, and then you also have a large Puerto Rican community who may have voted what?
They vote Democrat.
Democrat,
for the most part, and then there's younger Cubans, which you know tend to be they tend to vote a little more Democrat than do the older Cubans who actually came from Cuba. But also Florida has a diverse population of other groups of Hispanics, Mexicans, Venezuelans, Colombians, and where those groups go is something that Donald Trump should really be concerned about, and I know Hillary Clinton is concerned about it as well.
So if we have any more questions or comments?
Yes, so we have people from both sides weighing in.
Good.
Jamie Carmen writes, we need someone to run as an independent. He says Bernie Sanders would have had an opportunity to run if he ran that way.
As an independent?
As an independent.
Well, but he is even further to the left than Hillary Clinton. And thank you so much for the question. I mean, it's interesting because he has brought Hillary Clinton further to the left than, certainly, than her husband was back in the 90s when he ran.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, Bill was relatively conservative when you look back in time now, especially some of the comments he made. I mean, he made some comments about immigration. He signed the Defense of Marriage Act.
Right.
He was a supporter of Don't Ask, Don't Tell.
Right.
I mean, so looking back, the Clintons have changed a lot of their positions as well.
I mean, the party has moved to the left.
Absolutely. And both parties, you could argue, have moved
Republicans
either to the left or to the right.
That's exactly right.
But America is becoming more and more polarized. And we can see that when we look at numbers on Americans and how polarized they are. But what I will say on an independent candidate is that if Bernie Sanders were to have run, I do not believe he could have won. I think that he would have hurt Hillary Clinton, and he would have definitely put Donald Trump in the White House had he have run, because he would have absolutely hurt Hillary Clinton. He would have been a very strong independent candidate, but he would have hurt Hillary Clinton more than Donald Trump. There are two candidates running who are not Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, and that is Jill Stein
and
Gary Johnson.
But they don't really make a dent here in Texas at all. I mean, Gary Johnson's at 4%. And Jill Stein didn't even make 1%.
Well, they're not on the debate stage.
Right.
They're not really part of that national discussion, that back and forth that you have right now between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. That matters. When you can't make the headlines, when you can't make the debates, and when you don't have the money to go on television and have the advertising, that makes a big difference. There's also an institutional support for a Republican and a Democrat nominee. Look, a certain percentage of people are going to vote Republican no matter what. A certain percentage of people, they're going to vote Democrat no matter what. As an independent candidate, you simply do not have that.
But it is interesting in the sense that while you do have those people who are committed Republicans and committed Democrats, the number of people who are backing away from the parties, as we talked about at the beginning, is rising.
That is a trend you see nationwide where people really are just disinterested in both parties and they don't want to be a part of it. And so as that trend continues, perhaps a very strong candidate who is independent would stand a better chance. But there is still that institutional support on both sides, and that's what makes it difficult.
Do we have another comment?
So this is a comment, and it talks about debates. Aaron Maynard, he says, why hasn't Benghazi been brought up in debates?
Well, that's really, I mean, aside, if it's not asked by the moderator, isn't that the job of the candidates? If they want this to get out there, isn't it their job to get it out there and to talk about it if a topic is not brought up?
Well, it is. The moderators have been criticized, especially in the presidential debate. And they argued that there were many more tough questions for Donald Trump, many more tough follow-ups for Donald Trump than there was for Hillary Clinton. And if you look at any independent study, everyone pretty much agrees that was the case. So it wasn't necessarily the most advantageous debate for Donald Trump. And his performance wasn't great either, so he piled onto that issue. But Benghazi is an issue that Donald Trump can bring up, but it's one of many issues. I think that the greater issue for Hillary Clinton is trust. And also, if you look at the totality of her foreign policy, there's more than just Benghazi. You can bring up Benghazi. That's something that will hurt Hillary Clinton. You can talk about the instability in the Middle East. That's something that will hurt Hillary Clinton. You can also talk about issues such as the Iranian nuclear deal. That's another issue
and that
can hurt Hillary Clinton.
Now that did come up last night in the context of, is the world a safer place or not? And Pence said it wasn't because of the Iranian deal, and Kaine said it was because of the Iranian deal. Right.
And look, and we can also talk about, ISIS and terrorists.
Right.
And, Donald Trump, and Donald Trump sometimes overplays his hand. He overplayed his hand in the debate. He made a comment, and he said, Hillary Clinton, you've been fighting ISIS since you were born. Well, when he takes it that far, and it's obviously not true because ISIS hasn't been around for 70 years. So when you take it that far, you lose credibility. And that's what Donald Trump has to stop doing.
I have a question.
Yes.
So just wanted to let you know, there are many people chiming in.
Great.
There are
We
Bernie
love it.
supporters, there are Gary Johnson supporters, Trump supporters, and Hillary supporters.
Great. Thank you.
So that's great. Joanna Hernandez has a question, and I think it goes to your trust factor. Is either one of them qualified to be president? Is either one of them trustable?
Well, that's hard for really us to answer. That's obviously going to be up to the voters. I appreciate the question. But the one thing that I've heard, and I've been very fortunate enough to have gone to Iowa and New Hampshire and South Carolina, and the one thing that I've continued to hear as we cover this election, people always ask me, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, how do we end up with these two? They're not happy with these candidates, and you see that in the number of people who don't like Hillary Clinton and don't like Donald Trump. So I guess that's just the process of the primaries, right?
Correct. Look, these are two people who have been involved in public life for a very long time. And when you have
Donald
people
Trump has been in the public eye,
Correct.
but he's not been a public figure in the sense of government. I mean, he's a private businessman, but he's certainly been in the public eye.
Correct.
Yeah.
And they've both been in the public eye. They've both been in the public forum. Hillary Clinton, of course, has taken controversial stands on many issues, changed her positions on many issues. Donald Trump has obviously changed his positions on a lot of issues. And he has made controversial statements along the way. Even before he was running for president, he made controversial statements, picking fights with Rosie O'Donnell and different high-profile fights he's had. So both candidates will have significant negatives. How do we end up with these people? Well, you get these candidates because you have primary systems. Right. The first state is Iowa. That, on the Republican side, is a very evangelical state. It's a very evangelical caucus. It's a caucus, not a primary. And that's important because people have to show up to this caucus location. They have to enter the location. They have to wait for the caucus to start. Yeah. They have to hear from each side, so every candidate has someone speak. And then you get to cast your vote.
Right. But these are also the most interested people. They are really, they're all in.
They're all in, which means they tend to be a little more extreme or a little more right-wing or left-wing,
depending on,
than America as a whole.
But doesn't this go back to the central argument? When we go back and we talk about the number of people who are independents, who are not Republicans and not Democrats, which means in Texas they are not voting in the primary system, right?
Correct.
So isn't this a message to the voters who consider themselves, they don't want to be affiliated with a party, at least in Texas? Doesn't this go back and say, hey, you know what? If you want to say in which candidates are going to be in the general election, then you need to go and vote in a primary. You, at least in Texas, you need to say in who's going to end up in the general, right?
Absolutely. It would be very important for people who, even if you don't like the party system, go and vote in a primary. Make a difference. Help select that nominee so that you aren't to the point of a general election where you're looking at two candidates and you're going, I don't like either one of them.
Well, because there are 15 million people who are now registered to vote in the state of Texas, which is a record. I just checked this morning. And if you go back and you look at the people who voted in the presidential primaries, obviously a fraction of the people who are registered to vote. So if people are unhappy, at least in Texas, they have to go out and vote in the primary system. Obviously too late now, but for 4 years from now, it may be food for thought. And I appreciate all the comments and questions. I did want to talk about, because we've been polling about Senator Ted Cruz.
Correct.
After the Republican convention, he was booed off the stage because he didn't want to endorse Donald Trump. Well, several weeks ago, he did come out and endorse Donald Trump, and now we look at it, his favorables are up, still below 50%. They're about 45% here in Texas. His unfavorables are 50%, still high, but a lot better than they were when we spoke back in August after the conventions. He was at like 30s. His favorables were in the 30s, and his unfavorable was 61. So, as you predicted, he's moving back to a better territory for himself.
Correct. It will start to equalize, as we discussed, in the last poll. But there's reasons for that. When you're running for president, everything bad about you comes out.
Right.
And everyone, look, you're being attacked by Donald Trump. You're being attacked by Marco Rubio. You're being attacked by Jeb Bush. You're being attacked by the Democrats. There's a lot of scrutiny on you when you're running for president. And so, Ted Cruz had to endure that. And that hurt him, both with Democrats and with Republicans. Now, if you didn't vote for Ted Cruz in the primary, chances are you didn't like the guy, and you still probably are either going to have bad feelings about them, or you're going to gradually get to where you like him again. It'll take you some time.
And it looks like that's happening.
And it looks like it's happening, but then he kind of, stepped into it again at the convention when he did not endorse Donald Trump.
Right.
So anyone who liked Donald Trump, of course, really didn't like Ted Cruz at that point. So you kind of hurt yourself again. And even Republicans who didn't love Donald Trump saw what Ted Cruz was doing as enabling Hillary Clinton. And that is just not acceptable to a lot of Republicans. So he hurt himself with both Republicans and Democrats throughout this whole process.
Well, I remember being in Cleveland, the Republicans there, told him in his face, when he went to the Republican breakfast the next morning for the Texas delegation, and they thought he was putting himself and his family over party.
Right.
So obviously now that seems to be leveling off, and he doesn't have to worry per se, because his next re-election is 2018. So he still has
Correct.
2 years.
He has plenty of time to
numbers.
rebound, and 2 years in politics is an eternity.
Right, right. And we're going to be talking more about that. I appreciate your time today, Brian. We could probably talk for hours, but I know you have a plane to catch, and actually Senator Cruz is going to be in Fort Worth today, and I'm hoping to talk to him about the poll numbers and to get his reaction. So we're going to have that coming up on CBS 11 News at 5. We're also going to be talking about how Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton are doing here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So we're going to talk about that as well. Brian, thank you so much. Always great talking to you. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for all of your comments and questions out there on Facebook. And this is all going to be on our website, cbsdfw.com. For now, I'm Jack Fink, political reporter at CBS 11 here in Dallas-Fort Worth. Thank you for joining us. Have a great day.